All right, everyone, welcome back into another NFL DFS video. Going to be breaking down this Thursday night showdown here between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons. Let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so this slate is really all about news, guys. So Drake London, we already know he is going to be out, and so that means that we're looking at a few receivers to potentially be decent values for us. David Sills actually led the Falcons in snaps last week, did not record a catch, had 4 targets though, ending his kind of a touchdown streak. They had to go in 2 straight there. He's not a terrible play at his price tag, especially if you're searching for a value play. Then we also have Dylan Drummond as well for the Falcons, who could end up being a decent value punt play as well. He actually had the best day among the Atlanta Falcons receivers last week, guys. Both him and Sills I view as punt plays, but they're almost the same as like Darnell Mooney. And obviously Darnell Mooney's like the receiver that we all think should be in for a good spot, obviously with Drake London still being out, but that has just not really occurred under Kirk Cousins. Now, Mooney ended up having an 87% route share, ended up with 4 targets. Again, for a very low DFS output, that's not good. Drummond, guys, ended up playing in 60% of the snaps, has 71% route share. And then David Sills, 90% of the snaps. Basically, all the receivers, however, had about a 30 to 40 per air yards, which is obviously not something that we like. If we're looking at an Atlanta Falcons pass catcher, the one we want to be getting to, and arguably my favorite captain play on the slate, is actually going to be Kyle Pitts. The issue with Kyle Pitts is he is currently questionable as well. Now, I fully expect him to be able to be good to go. And if he is, he's going to be in for a good spot. So he gets a good matchup against the Bucs, who have given up the most receptions to opposing tight ends over the past 4 games, about 6 receptions per game to opposing tight ends, which is pretty huge for Kyle Pitts here, who Kyle Pitts has played in 90% of the snaps the last 2 weeks. Again, targeted heavily in both games, 10 targets last week, 8 targets the previous week, 97 air yards as well, guys, last week. And so obviously we are going to really like Kyle Pitts here on the slate. And if he's going to take advantage of that potentially good matchup, again, lately it's been more of an appealing matchup, then Kyle Pitts actually becomes a very sneaky good option here. Like, the way I see it is we're basically getting a receiver 1 at 9.6 for the captain's pick, and overall we'll take that. And then from there, guys, we do need to talk about Kirk Cousins. So I don't necessarily love Kirk Cousins here on this slate, and that's also kind of how the field views him, guys. Only about 35% for what it's worth. Kyle Pitts only 17%. That should end up being a pretty big advantage for us on the slate here. But Kirk Cousins, yeah, really needs to score a touchdown. He did have a touchdown taken away last week. If you give him that, not necessarily a terrible game, but also not great. The weakness of the Bucs defense is throwing the football. Maybe Bijan Robinson, I don't want to say like struggles. I don't think he's going to struggle, but maybe he doesn't have as big of an impact as we typically want him, and Kirk Cousins is able to throw for a passing touchdown. Now, part of the appeal for Kirk Cousins would be that he could throw a passing touchdown to Bijan Robinson. That's kind of the nice way in which the Falcons have used Robinson, is they're going to get him the football in the passing game as well if the running game isn't working. So I do end up liking Robinson a decent amount on the slate. Obviously, like, that's not really a hot take at all. And then from there, guys, I do want to call it Gonzalez here. The Falcons have been able to get into scoring position a decent amount. I mean, his lowest game was 6 DFS points. I think for this slate, we would certainly take that there at 4.6. And then I highly doubt this will happen, but just be on the lookout to see if Malik Heath is active in this game, because maybe he ends up being like the 4th receiver, and maybe like Sills and Drummond play a little bit less. I doubt that, but he was released from the Packers, and I would say he's probably slightly better than both of them. And so it wouldn't be surprising to see him get some work, but just be on the lookout for that. I do wish some of like the preseason guys that we were on, I mean, Drummond was fine, guys, and so I really don't mind Drummond as a pump play. I wish he was cheaper. I wish like Nick Nash was getting some work. Nick Nash was a fun preseason NFL DFS play for us. So I just wish we could get to him. Let's jump into Tampa Bay. So the tough part about Tampa Bay is we don't know whether or not Mike Evans is going to play, and we also don't know whether or not Jalen McMillan is going to play. On top of that, guys, Cade Otton is currently doubtful. And so if Cade Otton does sit, I do think that gets us onto a terrible punt play, which would be Payne Durham, who ended up playing 32% of the snaps, only had a 13% route share. But on the slate, that's $600. I feel like that's too cheap if Kadon ends up sitting. But really, I think with Kadon most likely sitting, that's just going to elevate some of the receiver plays that I want to be in. So guys, to me, guys, Chris Godwin has looked like he's back the last 2 weeks. Dropped a touchdown 2 weeks ago. Didn't necessarily love that, but ended up playing 70% plus of the snaps last week. And if we can kind of just lock him into 70+% of the snaps, even with Evans and McMillan potentially being back, I still think that'll happen at least this week. And if that does happen, he's one of my favorite plays and one of my favorite captain choices as well. Ended up with 8 targets last week, guys, 5 receptions, 455 receiving yards. He is, to me, a virtual must play. If it doesn't work out, I'm kind of okay with that. And then Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving's one of the more difficult plays for this slate as well, because Bucky Irving ended up playing only about 50% of the snaps. Now he had like a 71% snap share in like the first quarter, and then he got a little bit banged up and also was not that efficient rushing the football, and then kind of got it going at the end. He's clearly the top running back here for the Bucs, but if Rachaad White is still going to get some work, we probably still want to be on White in some capacity. And maybe if the Bucs are playing with the lead, like White ends up being decent, White is a pretty solid value play. Like, I think I'd actually rather get to one of the kickers before him, but there's not that big of a difference. At least we know White is going to give us some DFS points. So this is kind of the core of what I'm looking at right now. Now, Emeka Egbuka, I'm fine getting to him, guys. He ended up with 132 air yards last week. Not a very good week. He has been struggling lately. A lot of drops, but you can look at it that kind of twofold. The production is there to be had, okay? That's a good thing. And you could also argue, well, he's kind of had some bad games. He's due to kind of re-break out, if you will. But the flip side of that argument is that there are a lot of people, throughout the season, early on in the season, that were saying, the numbers, his separation numbers and whatnot, are not exactly adding up to the production that he's having. And I do think we've seen kind of both things kind of occur, where obviously he's due to regress, and he probably was getting a little bit lucky with Baker Mayfield just throwing dots to him in the end zone pretty much. The talent's clearly there. We're not doubting that. But I do kind of see him having a good game most likely, but that's assuming that he doesn't lose any snaps to Mike Evans and or Jalen McMillan if they end up being active. Now, if they're inactive, Sterling Shepard's a decent value. Tez Johnson is a kind of fun play, but I don't think we necessarily need to get to him. And then obviously we're going to want to try to get to Baker Mayfield as well. He's been struggling a lot recently. He's the biggest reason I would say for them just doing terribly lately, and he's going to need to have a good game, obviously. Now, the Falcons defense have been a little bit hit or miss lately, and so I don't know exactly how to gauge the Falcons defense. I do think we're going to get 10 points out of Baker Mayfield, and so you guys can probably already tell what I'm going to do here with this first look build. I think this ends up being a great first look build, but I'm very curious as to see what the 9-5 lineup builder is telling us are some of the best builds as well. So we'll go ahead and jump into that, but I do want to call it real quickly, guys, the 9-5 membership, because this tool is included in it, guys. So if you guys are interested in using the NFL DFS lineup optimizer as well as all the other tools available on the website, it's $10 a month. I make the tools as simple and as easy as possible for you guys to use. But yeah, let's go ahead and take a peek at what lineups are being produced for us here. So I'm going to raise up the projected fantasy points min a little bit, but I want to make sure we are still getting to Durham, because I do think he's going to be a value. So let's just see. Okay, he's at 3, so we're fine there. So we'll go to about 2. 3. We'll go to 3 for the min fantasy points. That just takes off a little bit of the fluff plays, I guess, for lack of a better term. And so we raised up the min salary a little bit. Well, we're just going to run 20 lineups here, see what spits out to us. The top lineup would be Robinson, Irving, Baker, Pitts, Tyler Algier, who I don't mind, and that is getting to Dylan Drummond. I don't mind the idea of getting to one of Dylan Drummond or David Sills. I find it highly unlikely that they're both going to have a good game, but I don't mind it. I think that logic makes sense. What's the top ownership lineup? Robinson, Irving, Baker, Pitts, Chase, and then Payne. Yeah, that also makes sense. That's a pretty good lineup. I do like the idea of getting to at least a kicker on the site. I think we could end up getting to 2 kickers as well. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Appreciate you guys being here. Make sure to leave a like on the way out, guys, and subscribe to the channel as well. Trying to grow this channel as fast as possible. Appreciate the support that you guys have shown as well. Thank you guys for watching. Good luck. And as always, let's keep cashing.